the regular meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Engineering and Operations Committee, as well as a special meeting of the Board of Directors. And we have a determination of a quorum, Mr. General Manager.
Happy to call roll. Director Harold Williams. Here. Chairman Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray. Director Scott Houston. Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any requests for public comment prior to this meeting, though this meeting is being held both virtually and in person. If anybody would like to make a public comment, now would be the time to indicate so. Please raise your virtual hand and we will recognize you. I do not see any request for public comment.
No request. Next item is presentations. I don't believe we have any. All right, so we will move on to the action calendar, and the first item is the approval to advertise for construction services to install VFD that we issued in the past. Mr. General Manager, do you want to introduce that item?
Happy to do so. This item is being presented by Wendell Johnson, Manager of Engineering. The item is 5A. It can be found in your packet, I believe, on packet page 3.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. If you could please turn to page 6 of your agenda packet, and we'll start with a project overview on the VFD and water pump replacement project. I'm on slide number 7. First, a little background on the variable speed VFDs, as we call them. They are controlled by changing the speed of the pump or the motor, so that you can have best efficiency in running the system. It allows for fine tuning of the speed control, protecting equipment, and reduced power consumption. It provides you efficiency across a series of pumps. Just an improvement of, we have a total of 120 VFDs throughout, VFDs and pumps throughout the system. We're going to be talking about the product water VFDs for the Title 22. And essentially we have 6 total VFDs. If we move to their next page, on page 8, this is tell you the location of the VFDs that we're talking about, the subject of the VFDs, and then move to page 9, and we'll give you a little bit of a current state of the VFDs. Okay, this project will eventually replace a total of 6 VFDs. We have about 10 VFDs that are top priority from our operators and operation. Of these VFDs that control the product water pumps, there are 3 that are out of commission, and they've been made out of commission because there's no more available parts for to service the VFDs. And so we first started this project, was brought to your attention in May of 2021. At that time, we awarded a contract to a consultant engineering firm to design the replacement for the VFDs. And then May of 2022, we procured the VFDs, and the VFDs are expected to be delivered shortly in October or late September. And so next page, please. The overall benefits of this project is to strengthen reliability, protect the systems and the satellite plants also, and to restore pumping capacity to include for future application. Next slide, please. We'll go over the overall schedule. Last May, we awarded the fabrication. It was expected to take about 42 weeks to fabricate the pumps. We had a preliminary submittal of August of 2022. And our final shop drawings were February of 2023. And we're asking at this particular junction to authorize, advertise for the construction contractor to actually install the VFDs, as well as to proceed forward with the construction management firm that would manage the construction on the project. Again, the expected VFD deliveries are in October of 2023, and we'd like to be able to award the construction service contract in November of 2023, with the project being commissioned early 2024.
Question.
Yes, you may.
Where are these VFDs constructed?
These VFDs were initially constructed in Finland, okay, and then they were finished here in the United States. So partially assembled in Finland, and the remaining assembly was done here in the United States.
And the new ones are going to be the same system?
Yes, they're all three identical. We standardized the VFDs so that we can reduce the amount of inventory required for spare parts and to make them more serviceable by having a standard VFD. That was part of the consultant's objective.
Just clarification on that. The new ones that we are about to install that have been purchased were fabricated in,
They were partially fabricated in Finland, okay, and the final fabrication occurred in the United States.
another follow-up. Could they have been fabricated 100% in the United States?
No, we did not find any suppliers of VFDs or the type of VFDs that we need for the service, the heavy-duty service of a 600 horsepower, 650 horsepower pump was not available in the United States from complete assemble, where some of the parts are sourced worldwide. This has quite a bit of different electronic chips involved in it, and so it is very difficult at this juncture. In the future, we may have better success as some of that manufacturing returns to the shores of the United States.
That's a very disappointing answer to hear. Okay, keep going.
Okay, and to recap, again, our expected VFD delivery is in October of 2023, and are expected to award the contract for the actual construction or the installation of the VFDs in November of this year, and early commissioning of the project in early 2024. Your next slide. And this is essentially the scope of this construction project, is to install the new VFDs along with some control cabinets and some additional switches so that the individual VFDs can be taken offline without impacting the whole series of VFDs. The engineer's estimated cost of constructing or installing these VFDs is approximately $400,000 or $394,000. And next slide, please. A recap of the overall budget for the VFD replacement project. The total contract reward for the design consultant was about $225,000. We've spent about $70,000. 70% of that, or $157,000. The fabrication was done by Wesco for a total price of $590,456. We've spent about 21% of that to date, or $125,553. The estimated total cost of installation is going to be $394,000, and the estimated construction services for the construction management of the project is estimated to be a little south of $150,000. Okay, and at this time, I'll take any questions and read the recommendation. Is there any additional questions?
Let's see.
I don't have any.
Williams, do you have any questions?
No.
You don't have any additional questions? Has Director Gray joined us? I have a couple of questions. First one is, what's the estimated construction cost of this item? In other words, we would be putting it out to bid. What's
The estimated construction value is at $395,000
the installation, correct?
for the installation.
And we've already committed last year, we ordered the VFDs, so they're basically, they haven't been 100% paid for, but that is a purchase order that was issued.
For $590,000.
And we also have paid for the engineering.
We paid for the engineering. Yes.
The only items left that have a little bit of unknown to them is the construction or installation of the VFDs.
Correct.
Last month, this board approved a interesting method to do servicing of mechanical, electrical equipment at the facilities. And that method brought us on a contractor who had the capabilities to, I believe, install something like this. Why are we considering that? This is a relatively small construction contract, well within the authorization that the board had approved last month for that particular procurement contract of up to $1 million. Why wouldn't we just use that here, since the VFDs have been ordered? Basically, it's an installation, removal of existing equipment and installation of new equipment.
The contract that the board approved last month was for an actual service contract for repair or replacement of motors and pumps, actual pumps. This is your VFD or drive system, which are controls for your motor and your pump. So it's outside the scope of the work that was approved last month.
I believe that what we approved last month was repair and replacement.
Right.
And the focus was on mechanical and electrical equipment. And we talked about pumps and motors. VFD is an electrical component. I'm not exactly the answer that you've provided, Wendell, is a stretch of my imagination that this would not qualify under that repair and replacement.
This would
It's
also,
a very basic electrical component. It's put into most facilities where you do need to control the delivery of power to equipment, and it's usually done by the electrical sub. So if we brought on a firm to do repair and replacement of mechanical and electrical equipment, why would we not do this? And if this was any more of an urgency to the district, I'm sure that the district would have just had that firm do it.
this also allows for the competitive bidding of the actual work.
I understand. And I believe that I argued for that previously. My question is, why was this not considered under that repair and replacement program that the board approved?
You're not engineering. They're more of like the shops, if you're referring to the ops contract where we just have the ability to pull some pumps. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, but that's meant to be at a quick, get it done while something's out versus the engineering portion of a VFD typically. Whether or not they do it, we could check into that.
I'm pretty sure that they can do this.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a request to comment from staff. Jason?
Hey, Director Alvarez. It's a great question that you have regarding if our on-call pump and motor contracts might be able to cover this, but in our specific detailed scope of services, we only cover rotating equipment. So we specifically called out, centrifugal pumps, vertical turbine pumps, and the associated motors that are attached to them. But our on-call motor contractors, though they are categorized as electrical contractors, they do not, they would not be able to provide or install the variable frequency drives that Wendell has presented. But it's a great question.
So the distinction's a very fine one that you did not specifically identify this as a line item in your contract.
Correct. And the vendors that we selected do not have in their expertise the ability to install variable frequency drives.
Very interesting set of answers. Thank you. On packet page 9, we're showing that the peak hour demand is 44 MGD. Just curious, how often do we encounter that peak hour demand?
Maybe I can give it a shot. Director, I'm not sure if we have the number of how many days we encounter that, but it'll probably depend on several factors. Mostly, it's the hottest day of the hottest month of the year.
I understand.
We don't have an answer for you.
Okay, so you don't have an answer. It may be once a year, it may be 10 times a year.
It could be once, it could be 10 times, it could be.
It'd be interesting to know how many times.
We'll look into that, yeah. Get that answer for you.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to read the recommendation. Staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to issue a request for bids for VFD installation for the disinfectant tertiary product pumps and VFD rehabilitation project, CIP number 10092.
Thank you. Director Williams, would you like to support that recommendation?
I would recommend that it goes forward to the board.
We'll move this one forward to the board. I would like staff to revisit the repair and replacement contract that we just recently awarded. And maybe, and if it requires bringing it back to this committee and the board, please do so, expanding some of the items that I think would be, such as this one, that would be realistically part of such a contract. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the action calendar. And that's item 5B. And it's the authorization to issue requests for bids for the Title 22 filter rehab and replacement project. Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item?
Happy to do so. This next item begins on packet page 37. And for this presentation, we have Orlando Rodriguez, our senior engineer.
Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and members of the committee. As EJ stated, the staff report is on page 37, but at this time, I'd like you to please turn to page 44 of the agenda packet for the presentation itself. So first, here's the agenda for today's presentation. It's a little bit lengthy, so please bear with me. So first, we'll start with the process overview at the Edward C. Little facility, followed by the Title 22 filters R&R project itself, some background information and so forth. Following that is a financial analysis of the project. I'm discussing several alternatives that we'd like to present today, as well as some next steps. And then at the end, questions. Next slide, please. One more. Perfect. Here you could see an aerial of the Edward C. Little facility. Just want to do a quick overview of kind of the Title 22 process itself. So on the northeast corner of the facility, water comes in, secondary effluent comes in from Hyperion via pump station and a force main. That then enters the pretreatment high-rate clarifiers kind of in the south middle of the facility. And then effluent from there goes into our filters. Just adjacent to that, you'll see filters 1 through 10, essentially labeled as train 1. And north of that, crossing the road, is the converted filters, train 2, which are filters 11 through 14. Effluent from the filters going to our chlorine contact basin, and then followed by the product water tanks, which then get pumped into our distribution system, sent to our satellite plants at source water, along with our irrigation customers. Next slide, please. Just some background on the filters themselves. In 1995, as part of the phase 1 construction of the Edward C. Little facility, filters 1 through 6 were constructed for the purpose of producing disinfected tertiary water, also known as Title 22 water, along with filters 11 through 14, which at the time served as pre-treatment for the production of advanced treated water for the West Coast barrier. Then in 1997, as part of the phase 2 expansion, filters 7 through 10 were constructed and basically added on to the existing filter structure of filters 1 through 6 for additional disinfected treatment capacity. And then in 2007, as part of the phase 4 expansion, filters 11 through 14 were converted for even more treatment capacity for the production of disinfected tertiary water. Next slide. So one thing I want to highlight here is a key component of the filters themselves are the underdrain laterals that help optimize performance while providing uniform distribution during the backwash cycle of the filters. These laterals typically have a useful life of 20 years. So if you see at the bottom of that table there, I have some information there in red where essentially showing the end of the useful life, for instance, for filters 1 through 6, that would have been in 2015, filters 7 through 10 in 2017, as well as filters 11 through 14, 2017. So these filters or these underdrains have been operating beyond their end of useful life for about 6 to 8 years. During the chlorine contact basin R&R project, it was also discovered inside the basins, and a $93,000 change order was executed to remove the behavior from there. This is important since the Title 22 process is interconnected, and these failures have impacts to other elements downstream of the filters themselves. So in the end, these kind of spot repairs that we performed essentially, as you could see, only really extended the useful life of the filters for about 4 to 5 years until they failed again. And the average cost to bring those filters back online was about $102,000. Next slide, please. So due to the repeated failures of filters 2, 8, and 9, it was decided to undertake a more comprehensive R&R for the remaining 11 filters themselves. In 2020, an RFP for design services was initiated, and after a thorough evaluation process, the project was awarded to Carollo Engineers. The scope of services included an evaluation of R&R alternatives, drawings, specifications, and essentially at the end, a construction bid package that we could put out for the installation of new elements, filters, and so forth. During the design phase, 4 technical memorandums were completed, and a recommended scope of work was developed to replace the under-drain laterals, perform concrete repairs, and construct necessary safety improvements. The construction bid package was completed in June of last year, 2022. Next slide, please. So as part of the 1997 Phase 2 expansion, filters 7 through 10 were constructed using a portion of the existing 1 through 6 structure. In this case, the north walls of 7 and 8 were originally designed as non-water-bearing walls that are not carrying forces that were not originally planned. I know this sounds repeated, but if you look at the top right picture in this slide, you could see the leaking cracks and so forth that's noted on the exterior wall of filter number 8. Carollo performed the structural analysis, technical memorandum number 2, which indicates that a seismic event can result in a failure of that wall. As part of the project, staff still recommends to move forward with the safety improvements in the form of structural lateral bracing, crack repairs, and added concrete beam depth that will increase the load capacity of those walls. Next slide, please. And I do want to go over the crack repairs because that was initially asked for staff to move forward with. So as a result of the structural analysis, staff was authorized to issue a request for bids for the safety improvements in late 2022. Bids were due on January 18 of this year, and one bid was received for $150,000 to perform all the safety improvements. Staff presented that to the committee to award the safety improvements, but it was voted at the time to not proceed and implement the crack repairs only. We tried to negotiate with the one contractor, the one bid that we received, to just perform the crack repairs, but unfortunately they declined to move forward with just doing that scope of work. So we then proceeded with trying to find some local contractors that specialize in crack repairs, concrete work. At the time, there was no interest from some of the local contractors that we reached out to. So we then decided to go out to solicitation again and issue a request for bids for the crack repairs only. That was initiated in June of this year. Bids were due in July last month, and unfortunately we did not receive any bids for the crack repairs only. We reached out to local contractors again to see if anybody was interested. We received one contractor that was interested, and we performed a site visit with them last August 12th, last week, and we received a bid for $84,000 for the crack repairs only. So I do want to point out that the larger overall project does have the crack repair safety improvements included in it, but we do have options if we want to just perform the crack repairs only and move forward with that.
Question?
Yes, you may.
Why do you think it's been so difficult to get contractors to bid for this crack repair business?
And well, some of the contractors, specifically when we received one bid, they're a pretty large firm. Essentially, just doing the crack repairs, at least for them, was not, I guess you could say, profitable for them. There was a line item for about $50,000. We basically asked if they would be interested in just doing that, but they declined. So just to do that one item without the other two items, which was the lateral bracing and so forth. So some of the small local contractors, being that we are a municipality and meeting our insurance requirements and things like that, they declined at the time. So right now, the current contractor, at least, they're pretty small. DeBarra Construction, Concrete and Masonry is interested, but the amount is higher than we originally received.
What was the amount again?
$84,000 just for the crack repairs only.
We also asked the contractor about Jason's project.
Yes, thank you, Barkev. We did reach out to also Pacific Hydrotech. They are the contractor on the converted filter booster pump station project, seeing how they're familiar with the site. Not that they declined, but their initial estimate is about $135,000 just to do the crack repair. So
Just to follow up on Director Deere's question. And I think it's a concern of this board, at least this board member, about the difficulties that we have in getting bids. Pacific Hydrotech, I'm very familiar with the firm, okay? They're not a concrete repair firm. And so whatever number they're going to give you will be a very high number. And they're a fairly good-sized construction firm. And this is a relatively small job. There are multiple, more than one, concrete repair firms that actually specialize in highly damaged concrete, and concrete where you have spalling rebar, rusted rebar, where there's extensive amount of concrete removal required, cleaning of rebar, installation or repair of rebar, and then patching. And unfortunately, I don't have them with me, but I can show you pictures of very severe damaged concrete, much more so than this one. And those firms would be more than interested in doing a job like this. They would probably say, I can't get to it for a month or whatever period of time. And they would be the type of firms that are really qualified to do such repair work. I don't understand why in our bidding system, such types of firms don't follow the bidding that we put out or aren't reached. It's just a rhetorical question, but it's really frustrating to see that we really have a hard time outside of a small group of firms getting bids. And it seems like a lot of the things we do, because of the limited number of firms willing to bid, come in at a fairly high cost. It'd be interesting if we could get beyond that and open this whole arena up to a larger number of firms and get other people interested in that there is work to be done here. There's a lot of smaller firms that would be much more than capable of doing a lot of this work. But the system that we have, for whatever reasons, is not a system that they're either comfortable with or knowledgeable with. And we miss a tremendous number, both on the professional services and in the construction services, of potential bidders that would make everything a lot more competitive. And I think in the long run, be beneficial to the district's bottom line. Anyways, no restraints necessary. Just keep that in mind, and as we move forward, really focus on that. But I'll come back to this particular issue at the end. Go ahead.
next slide, please. So I just want to point out one correction here on this slide. Unfortunately, the picture on the left does show the filters that are offline in red, but the table does not match that. So if you look at the second column, filter offline for train 1 is just 6. And then for train 2 is just 11 and 13. So that shows more filters offline than there actually are. Overall, the filters for filters 1 through 10, they have a design treatment capacity of 30 MGD. with a firm treatment capacity of 27 MGD, just one being in backwash. And then also for filters 11 through 14, a design treatment capacity of 10 MGD, but one being also in treatment, in a backwash cycle. So a firm treatment capacity of about 7.5 MGD there. So in total, essentially, we have in theory overall firm capacity of 34.5 MGD, but at this time, our current treatment capacity is at 26.5 MGD. So in essence, by replacing the under-drain laterals, we believe it will restore the full treatment capacity of all the filters and thus extend their useful life for about 20 years, putting us at around 2042 by the time we would probably have to do something again to replace them. Next slide, please. So as a part of a gathering exercise, data was collected from SCADA for 2018 and 2019. At this time, the highest daily average flow was 25 MGD in 2018 and 23 MGD in 2019. Also, the max day demand was 30 MGD in 2018 and 28 MGD in 2019. So as you can see, essentially with our current firm treatment capacity, we are not able to meet the demands using Title 22 water as a source water. So in essence, what that means is that we have to supplement, and we supplement with potable water when that happens. Next slide, please. One more. Perfect. As previously mentioned, the Title 22 water is the source water for the satellite plants. Title 22 water enters the satellite plants and is refined further to produce either nitrified or boiler feed water for the particular refinery. Typically when the product water demand is greater than the Title 22 source water coming in, potable water supplement is used as makeup water to meet these demands. But unfortunately, this comes at a high cost to West Basin because we're essentially paying the rate of the local purveyor when we supplement with potable water. So in the case of, in this slide, as you can see, this is for CNTP. When we supplement with potable water, West Basin loses approximately $936 per acre foot in recycled water sales. So for the fiscal year 21-22, we lost a total of about $1.7 million at CNTP due to the potable water supplement. And just to put this in the environmental perspective, the potable water supplement is equivalent to the usage of about 5,550 typical households, which is essentially a family of 4. Next slide, please. Here we're looking at JMM. At JMM, we lost a total of about $744,000 due to potable water supplement. And that is the equivalent of about 2,586 typical households. Next slide, please. And this is Torrance, but there's kind of a unique situation here where essentially the refinery pays for the potable water supplement when needed, as they own the potable water meters. So although there might not be an economic impact to West Basin, there's still an environmental one. So that results in about 2,772 typical households per year. Next slide, please. So in summary, the potable water supplement accounted for almost 1/3 of the product water source used to produce either nitrified or boiler feed water. So this resulted in a total of about $2.4 million in lost recycled water sales, along with the equivalent of almost 11,000 typical household usage for the fiscal year 21-22. Next slide, please. So for consideration purposes, staff is proposing 3 alternatives to move forward with this project. Alternative 1 would perform a comprehensive R&R on the 11 remaining filters with no prior repairs. We already did some repairs on filters 2, 8, and 9. As previously shown, the filters are beginning to fail, and this alternative will limit the probability of any major future repairs while increasing reliability and customer service by avoiding increased service interruptions. Alternative 2 would perform a comprehensive R&R on just the 3 offline filters, 6, 11, and 13, and essentially take a wait and see approach by performing spot repairs or an R&R on a filter once it fails. So just essentially just doing the R&R on 3, and then the rest, which are the 8 remaining filters, just kind of rehabbing them as they fail and move forward that way. That alternative takes a more reactive approach, as it does present a higher risk of potential customer interruptions and compliance due to the likely failure of those 8 remaining filters. And then last but not least, alternative 3 would allow for an R&R for up to 2 filters a year. We would program the project each year, and therefore it would take approximately 6 years to complete the 11 remaining filters. Unlike alternative 2, I mean, this takes a more proactive approach. And although it still presents a risk of potential customer interruptions, it does hopefully limit it by just us doing 2 a year moving forward for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. So in comparison, I just want to highlight here the total cost for each alternative. Although alternative 1 does have the highest capital or initial capital expenditure, it does have the lowest total cost since all the work will be performed at once. The total cost for alternative 1 is estimated to be about $5.6 million. Alternative 2, taking a more reactive approach, does have the highest total cost of any of the 3 alternatives. This is essentially obviously due to kind of taking a wait and see approach, and then also the necessary steps to bring the filter back online. The total cost for alternative 2 is estimated at about $8.5 million. And alternative 3, taking a proactive approach and programming, 2 filters a year, has a slightly higher cost than alternative 1, and that is estimated to be approximately $6.6 million. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to just kind of do a comparison about project cost versus potential paybacks for each alternative. We did include a do nothing approach that assumes that no comprehensive R&R will be performed on the filters, and thus essentially maintaining the amount of potable water supplement that we're currently experiencing. By implementing either alternative, it is understood that we will reduce our potable water supplement, not eliminating it, but hopefully reducing it by ranging from anywhere from 25% to 75%, hopefully. Therefore, in the case for alternative 1, being that we would basically do an R&R on all the remaining filters, if we are able to essentially reduce the potable water supplement between 25 and 75%, we can expect a return on investment between approximately 3 years and 7.5 years. Next slide, please. Noting the same considerations for alternative 2, just because we're taking a wait and see approach and more of a reactive approach to this alternative, it is unlikely for us, I think, to essentially possibly get a 75% reduction on potable water supplement, just because we're somewhat maintaining the status quo until we actually perform an R&R on the filter. So we're thinking anywhere between 25 to 50%, hopefully, on a reduction on potable water supplement. So in this case, our return on investment would be approximately 3 years for that initial capital expenditure only, which is about $2 million, and up to 10 years on the total cost of this alternative. Next slide, please. And similar to alternative 2, we believe that, alternative 3, we're likely not going to be able to achieve a 75% reduction, more in line between 25 to 50%. So in this case, for alternative 3, we can expect a return on investment on the total cost of this alternative somewhere between 4. So here, just kind of going over each alternative, some of the key factors, and based on the information presented before, staff is recommending that we implement alternative one. As previously stated, it has the lowest total cost overall of the project, increases the reliability of all filters at once, decreases future customer interruptions, and essentially limits the possibility of any future repairs on the filters themselves moving forward. Next slide, please. So here are next steps and just a preliminary project schedule. Obviously, we are meeting today. We get authorization for action to request bids. Solicitation would begin next month in September of 2023. And hopefully then we would award the project November of this year, 2023. And the estimated construction timeline is about 12 months. So that would put us into November of next year, 2024 for completion. Forward. Next slide, please. So here, just kind of a recap on the estimated project expenditures. If we were to move forward with alternative one, in terms of previously planned project expenditures, we previously anticipated about 5.2 million in last fiscal year and just over $2,000 in this fiscal year, but things have changed. So right now, we have a revised capital expenditures and are currently anticipating for this fiscal year a spend of about $4.2 million and about almost $800,000 for next fiscal year. Partial external funding in the amount of $468,000 has been secured through fixed payments from our refineries. So the difference being about, say, 4.6 million would have to come from our pay-go and funds from our reserves as well to complete the total spend for the project. And next slide, please. And here I'd just like to read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to issue a request for bids for the Title 22 filters rehabilitation and replacement project alternative one for the for construction services and construction management services. And with that, that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Williams, do you have questions?
Yes. Basic question. I see that the chair is totally into this. So I'm assuming he has a lot more experience in dealing with this than I do, because I'm not there yet. So, but I'd like to hear from the general manager. Where are you on this?
I'm in support of the staff recommendation. We've been talking about this now for some time. You'll notice that the presentation was maybe a little lengthy, but the intent was to answer any and all questions throughout that presentation. One of the most important things that I review in this is just the use of potable water at our refineries. That's problematic to the district. It's problematic for our customers. And so with that, I support staff's recommendation.
All right, thank you.
Director Deere? No question. And did Director Gray join us or no? Okay. I have some questions. Oh, Director Gray, welcome. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
I want to clarify one item that tangentially got a little bit of discussion. The intent, if approved as recommended, is that the crack repairs be included in this, inclusive of the bracing that this committee and the board had previously considered and requested that just do the crack repairs. That is the recommendation that's included here, correct? So I would like to decouple that, because I think that this board and this committee has already provided direction in that. And I think that the lack of getting adequate bids is something that we ought to revisit. And that I think that with a little more effort, we can get bids from qualified contractors that do that kind of work. So when we're talking about moving this forward, I would like to clarify that what we will be moving forward is the project as described, with the exception of the crack repairs slash structural bracing. Is that acceptable?
Well, I don't know, how, the crack repairs, is that big a deal that we should do that? Or should we just leave it in the main project and go for it that way?
In our previous discussions, and we discussed this a lot, the crack repairs can be done because there's cracks there. But the overarching justification for spending the kind of money that would be spent and doing the crack repairs and the bracing is really not justified. And we went through that and said the reality is that even if there was a catastrophic failure, which is what would require to happen in order for all that water to rush out, the likelihood of any damage beyond the flooding that would occur, and it's limited to a very limited area, fully contained, that there wouldn't be anything else. And that would require a very major earthquake, in which case we have a lot more serious issues to worry about. And including it in this is going to add additional cost because the contractors, a significant cost for the same reasons that when we talked earlier about the crack repair and the types of cost estimates they were getting, that they were very high and they seemed unreasonable for just the crack repairs, is that there will be a lot of overhead added to it and markups, etc., as this will just be one of those items that the type of general contractor that's going to be doing this work will end up subbing out. And for the same reasons that we're getting very high numbers now, will add quite a bit to the bid. So I would like to defer and spend some time going back and looking at our bidding procedures and getting out there and seeing if we can just do what we originally had directed staff to do.
So you believe that we would save money if we bid it where the prime contractor is the crack repair guy? It's not a sub out deal.
Right, if you had a specialty concrete repair firm.
Have you considered that?
My conversations with the executive manager of engineering operations was that, and I could be wrong, you can say it far more eloquently, was that the increase between just the crack repair and the additional work was going to be minimal. So I thought that was the reason why we kept that in there. Am I characterizing that correctly, or?
Right, I mean, the crack repair plus the bracing, if you wanted to do the bracing, together would be around 2% of the overall project cost. So if you're putting it all together, perhaps even less. When we did bid out the bracing and the crack repair together, it was around 150K. And then the crack repair only, we received no bids. We did consider it, to answer your question. We put it out to bid and received no bids. So our recommendation is to include it, realizing, yes, there would probably be a markup on the contractor, on the prime contractor for that. But also it will allow that all the work being done in that same area be done under one roof. We hold one contractor to the responsibility to do the crack repairs and as well as the rehab of the under drains as well.
What about the timing, the completion of the entire job? Because what we really we're looking at, want to have done is no more potable water being used in the project. We want to get to Title 22 water.
Yes, implementing the project, we want to get it done as soon as possible. So we can limit as much potable water use as possible.
But the addition of this work would not slow down that process.
Okay.
It can be done in parallel.
But then why is there a big issue here?
I think the committee initially, earlier in the year, perhaps disagreed with staff's recommendation that the structural repairs are necessary, the bracing and the beam. And the board voted to just go with crack repair only. And we, as reported today, we were unsuccessful in getting appropriate bids for that. So the chairman asked that we go back and take a look at the procurement procedure. We'll do that. Our recommendation is to bring back the bracing and the beam and the crack repair and put it all under one roof and one contract to get it all done. But certainly there are other avenues that we can proceed with.
If I may comment on that, Director Williams. When the item of the crack repair structural bracing came up, that project was brought forward to the committee as a standalone project that needed to be done right away because of the imminent danger of failure due to the seismic event occurring. And after much discussion, this committee and the board agreed that that wasn't that great a potential probability of occurrence, and that probably we could just do the crack repairs and be done with it. Now I'll go back, this is a year ago almost. We haven't had that catastrophic failure in the meantime, and at the time we were being requested that this needed to be done because there was an emergency and it needed to be repaired due to the potential catastrophic failure. So now we didn't get in that interim period of time since we directed staff to go ahead and repair the crack. We apparently didn't get any acceptable bids for a myriad of reasons. And today we're seeing the same item that at one time was of a high enough concern that it needed to be addressed as a standalone item because of the potential failure, and it was a very high risk, being brought back and folded into an overall project that will be completed in probably 18 months. And more than likely will be one of the last things the contractor will do out there because that bracing is going to get in their way of doing their other repairs on the filter beds. So they're going to, and when they set up their CPM schedule, they're going to end up showing that as one of the later items. And unless we prioritize and says, no, that's a high priority item that we want done right away, which I did read the specs that closely, I didn't read it all, I have to apologize. They will not more than likely prioritize. So I'm not convinced, and I haven't heard any argument to convince me that we can't just try to work out and find out what our deficiencies are in our bidding process, that we're missing out on an awful lot of potential bidders. And maybe use this as an example of a way to tweak the process to better reach out to other firms. So for all of those reasons, I do think they ought to be decoupled. Whether we move with the major repairs of the filters, a separate item, and I would like to just pursue that discussion, but separate it out from the crack repairs. I don't know if I've convinced you or not, but that's the argument.
So the big benefit here then, you believe is the money we would save on not having this done. Because we've gone, how many years, how much time has passed since it was a major repair to now it's no longer a major item.
This discussion was taking place last year on the crack repairs and structural bracing and the urgency of it. So, you know, in my opinion, I think we can handle the crack repair. Arguably, the crack repair and so on, given the size of this contract, it's going to be a small percentage when you embed it in a much larger contract. At the time when it was a standalone contract, it was, so everything is relative. You know, when you're looking at, and not that this was a $10 million contract, but when you're looking at a $10 million contract, a $500,000 item doesn't quite seem that big. But when you're looking at a $500,000 item on its own, it seems quite big. So all things are relative. Anyways, I would just really like to focus on the crack repairs as separate and really use that as a way to find out what are the deficiencies in our bidding process, because I think we've all questioned that in the past.
Why do you believe that?
Why? I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think there's a certain number of contractors that believe that understand the district, track the district, and there's an awful lot of people out there, especially in the professional services area, who would tell you why waste our time, and they don't track it, and they don't really see the items come up. I believe you know that also, that there are a lot of firms that just aren't aware of this potential, and other firms that are just saying, you know, they're going to always go with their favorite contractors and firms. Well, I don't believe that's true. I'm just saying that is the understanding in the other side of the fence.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe just touch on that, because you've mentioned that before, and I appreciate that you said that you don't believe that perception is correct. But I did want to let you know that I've met with the executive manager of operations and engineering. We've heard you loud and clear. I think our outreach efforts when it comes to work with West Basin is above and beyond what most agencies would do. And I would just like to point out, because I know that this is a public meeting, so people are watching it or will watch it in the future. One of the things that we've really done is just opened ourselves up to meeting with anybody and everybody to talk about not just the work that we currently have, but the future of the agency, the future of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility, additional opportunities to grow the use of recycled water. So I think within the industry, I think it is recognized that there's a lot of opportunity with West Basin. We continue to handle and staff as many of our outreach efforts and those where we go out and actually meet with contractors to talk about how to do business with West Basin. So I want you all to know that we're aware of the concern, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we not just appropriately market our opportunities, but also bring in diverse bidders and responders. So. That's it. I just wanted to address that.
Thank you. And I do think that there is more outreach now, since that's become a question that's come up multiple times in the board, and how do we better reach out? And there is a concerted effort to do that. I very much appreciate it. So the work that staff is doing in that direction. So that we're not here all afternoon.
Why not? Well, I would, what's on the floor right now is going to the next step, which is to go out to bid. That's correct?
Correct.
So what I would recommend that we send this to the board without a recommendation, and we have this discussion when all of the board members are available. That way, we can put it to rest quickly.
That's fine. Can we return to the item though and finish asking questions and explore?
Oh, sure.
Can we go to packet page 63? And this is the cost comparison of the three alternatives. And the recommended alternative that staff is proposing is alternative number 1. And it's shown as the least cost alternative.
Sorry?
Is this the least cost alternative?
Well, yes, the least total cost, it's all the way at the bottom. So total cost of the project, about $5.6 million.
I have a question. When I add up all of the items in column 2 under alternative 1, between the first row and the last row, staff labor, I came up with a 5.62 million. Mhm. Yeah. When I add up those same rows in columns 3 and 4 for alternative 2 and 3, I don't come up, or I don't, my math is a little fuzzy, I guess. I don't get to 8.5 million or 6.6 million. So how do we get there? Because it's very clear in one how to get there. And in the others, you can add those numbers up any which way,
Right.
but arithmetic is arithmetic, and it won't get you to 8.5 million or 6.6 million in columns 3 and 4.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, that's definitely my fault for not clarifying that. Alternative 2, just in essence, if you look back kind of at the timeline, we're essentially assuming that one filter would be down per year, so we would perform an R&R for one filter per year. And it also includes the cost of bringing that filter back online. So those costs of just one filter a year, then being 8 years in total to R&R or fix them essentially. And then the cost to bring those back online, it's about $8.5 million. Yeah, there's a lot more other factors that go into play on alternative 2, just because of the fact that each year fastest construction costs go up and so forth, and the impacts that has to our at the Edwards C. Little facility in terms of media and so forth. So those costs are rolled into there.
Okay, so in the future, it would be really a lot more honest to then be able to go through and add up
Yeah.
the columns and come up with a number. So to me, it was very misleading when I looked at that number and I said, where'd that number come from? Okay? Just isn't there. And if I prepare a table, put a table in my report, that table adds up, unless they're made an honest error in the math. But I mean, an honest error here isn't what occurred. These numbers are not representative of what that table is intended to say. The table is intended to say, really, this is the least cost alternative, which may or may not be the case. when you look at the second row from the bottom, the fiscal year 23-24 costs, those are the costs that we really are looking at. So approval of this item today is really committing us to spending about $4.3 million. Because that's the cost of the construction, the structural improvements that you'll be embedded in there that we just talked about, which is the crack repairs, 150,000, that number hasn't changed in a year. The contingency, the construction support or construction management services and staff time. So really, the action, that approval of this item would be $4.3 million. Approval of alternative 2 or 3 is either 2 or 1.6 million. If I go to, I have some questions. If I go to packet page 40, which is the staff report, it talks a little bit more in depth than the cartoons. On alternative 1, it says that performing R&R on all remaining filters and constructing safety improvements, the alternative extends the useful life of those 11 filters. Doesn't tell me how long that useful life is being extended. And then you may not have the answer now, but that would be an interesting answer to have. What is the useful life extension of performing R&R? Is it extending it for another 5 years,
20 years.
another 6 months, etc.? So maybe you can come back. You don't need to answer it now, but if this is going to move forward, you'll have that. That is a question, or maybe you can expand on the staff report and address it in the staff report.
Alvarez, it's on packet page 50 on the slide. It's 20 years.
If I look at that one, the 20 years, I'm saying, R&R is R&R really going to extend this that much? Anyways, I just think I would like a fuller discussion of that. I'm just asking you, letting you know what my questions are. When I look at an alternative 2, and you then have a small description there that performing R&R on the inoperable filters, 3 total, and constructing safety improvements. Run the 8 remaining filters to undergoing to failure and perform R&R repairs on a case-by-case basis. That does seem kind of draconian, but when you do say run them to failure, do you know what that means? Well, how long does it take to run something to failure? And what do we mean by failure? So,
Should we answer it or?
yes, you can.
So essentially it's a failure, meaning that in cases that we've seen before, like media loss, right? So the underdrains themselves, the laterals have failed, thus media is escaping, and therefore we have to take the filter offline. It's not just an underdrain failure or something else that basically then we consider that filter to be offline and thus have to do some extensive work, like an R&R, to bring it back online.
So failure in that case doesn't mean failure where these things are done, burned out. Failure means the breakthrough is such that you need to take them offline and repair them. I read failure, I go, what do they mean by failure?
Run failure means it's a reactive approach. It fails, then we make the fix, versus doing it proactively is not a run to failure.
And then you talk about alternative 3, and alternative 3 says it's kind of a hybrid approach that really you perform R&R, get everything pretty much copacetic right now, and then you, instead of repairing them all, you repair them on a sequential basis, take 2 of the filters out of service every year and repair them or rebuild them, however you want to describe that, and do that for multiple years. And then on any 1 year, it's about 1.5 million if we go to the other table, 1.6 million per year, which in the aggregate will be more than, but it'll be spread out over 6 years. one of the things that is mentioned in there is that there are issues with the NC Little plant, and there may be pivoting that's going to take place and what direction the NC Little plant is going to be taking. And then one of the items that was discussed in the staff report is that may take up to 10 years for that to happen, and these things are going to be replaced and repaired sooner than that and paid back sooner than that. I'm not quite sure 10 years is really the agreed upon timeframe. So I'm still concerned about the continued investment in some of the items at the NC Little plant that when we step back and look at what we're really going to do, may be some costs that we're going to say, well, in retrospect, we shouldn't have done it. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. That still is a concern of mine. And I think warrants more discussion by the board, and will probably be given more discussion. But I look at the timeframes that we have here, and that 10-year timeframe that's being used in the staff report for justification of this, I have some heartburn. On the next page, page 41 of the packet, under future direction of water recycling program, this is what we talk about within the next 10 to 15 years. It says that the potential payback period of approximately 3 to 7.5 years. And you showed that one series of graphs where I think it was 7.5 years for the one. So when you're making that statement of a potential payback period of 3 to 7.5 years, what is that referring to?
So essentially, if we go to, packet page for alternative one on 64, what we do show is a do nothing approach, being that we just maintain our status quo, right? We're going to supplement potable water at our satellite plants and maintaining that for the foreseeable future. So that's the blue line there. So that's based off of, if we do this project being alternative one, although we won't eliminate the use of potable water supplement, it's hard to tell exactly what reduction in potable water supplement we will achieve. So in essence, we show a range here of possibilities, including if we just reduce, let's say 25% in potable water reduction versus 75%. So 75% being the best case scenario. If we're able to achieve that, we're looking at about 3 years in return in our investment, and then 7.5 for the 25%.
I do read these reports, so sometimes when I read them, it's like I'm going, I don't understand that. In the case here, it would be nice to have seen that described better in the report, and even included in the report reference to that one graph, because 3.5 or 3 to 7.5 is 3 for alternative one or alternative, whichever alternative. 5 for the other alternative, 7.5 for the preferred alternative. But when you read the staff report, hard to understand that. Okay, and the written word tends to be usually more useful than the presentation. So I like to read reports, and then I can get into it and say, okay, here's, but it would be beneficial if we were a little bit more thoughtful in the reports. Okay. All right, so those are my basic comments. I think that the board understands that I believe that we have a lot more questions to ask before we proceed with this. And if I was to support anything, I would support alternative 3, where you would take and do the repairs, and every year take two of the filters out of service. Because if we do something in the next couple of 3 or 4 years and change direction, we will not have overcommitted resources. So if I was to support this, I would be supporting alternative number 3, which is your hybrid approach. But I don't believe that this committee is going to make a decision on this. And Director Williams has already asked that this be moved forward to the board without a committee recommendation. So such will be the case. All right. We can move on. The next item up on the action calendar is the funding request for Service Connection West Basin 23 relocation. So Mr. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and let me first
Yes,
begin
sir.
by,
Here. Mr. Chair
Yes.
and Director Ray, I just want to say regarding the last item, before you move on, I think it's been a great discussion. I've heard your comment and Director Williams, and I do think the board, all of us need to weigh in on that decision. So I just want to make that comment. So thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, Director Gray. I should have asked for other directors' comments.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
yes, Mr. Chairman, I did want to apologize. Item 5C, which as you just mentioned is related to the funding request for Service Connection WB 23 and relocation. This presentation will be provided by Orlando Rodriguez again, but I do want to point out that in an earlier draft of the agenda, this item was not included. We've had our engineering team working on this with Golden State Water Company as well as Metropolitan Water District over the past week and a half. And so we were able to get everything done in time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Orlando.
Thank you, EJ. Please turn to page 73 of the agenda packet for a copy of the staff report. And just to kind of a little bit history on this project itself, back in 2018, Golden State Water Company requested that MWD relocate Service Connection WB 23. Currently, it's on the Culver City feeder in the city of Culver City, and they requested that it be relocated to the Sepulveda feeder. Per their procedures, MWD performs all items related to the project, implementation of the study phase, preliminary and final design, procurement, construction, startup, and lastly, the project closeout. In these scenarios, West Basin acts as the intermediary between both parties for items like invoicing and payment. For example, MWD invoices West Basin for the project-related costs, and in return, West Basin invoices Golden State Water. To date, West Basin has passed through payments to MWD from Golden State in the amount of about $790,000. And MWD currently is finalizing the construction bid package with the intention to go out to solicitation in November this year for that project. This month, MWD requested $60,000 from West Basin for 2 long lead items, a check valve and an air vacuum valve for the project. The reason for the request is that these have about a 24-week time period until they receive it. So in order to kind of not disrupt the current project schedule, they're requesting payment now in the amount of $60,000 for they to procure the items and have them ready when the construction begins for the project. West Basin has received the funds from Golden State and is ready to issue payment to MWD. So at this time, I just would like to read the recommendation. That staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to have Metropolitan Water District procure 2 long lead items with a payment of $60,000 to Metropolitan Water District to be fully funded by Golden State Water Company. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Williams. Any question?
Nope.
Director Deere?
No.
Director Gray? Okay, This is basically a pass-through item. We're gonna fund, upfront the $60,000.
We already received the funds. Yeah.
So, but there's gonna be additional monies that, Met's gonna spend and ask for reimbursement.
Yes. So at some point, Met's going to request money for solicitation, construction, and so forth.
I'm gonna make a alternate recommendation. Given that this is gonna be 100% reimbursed by Golden State, that, and you're gonna be bringing this back multiple times. I think we've seen this once before. And so every time there's a request for reimbursement from Met, and they will probably come back through, as you just said, several more times. It's pretty much all we're doing is authorizing the expenditure of the monies that we're getting reimbursed for. So I would suggest that when this item moves forward to the board, I believe it will be moved forward to the board, and we bring it back to the board, authorizing the general manager to go ahead and be given the authority, I guess is the way to phrase it, to approve all future expenditures of requests for reimbursement from the Metropolitan Water District, subject to the condition that this is 100% paid for or reimbursed by Golden State. Is that maybe something acceptable?
That would be acceptable to me.
Okay, so when we move this forward, maybe we can bring it back to the board in a slightly different way, just authorizing the general manager to have the authority to go ahead and reimburse the Metropolitan Water District for all future expenditures, subject to us being reimbursed by Golden State. Director Gray, are you okay with that? Director Buell? Okay. All right. And we're gonna move to the information calendar, and it's 4 o'clock. I'd like to be able to leave at 4:30 today. I don't mean to rush you all. But maybe we can take a couple of these out of sequence. The Palos Verdes Recycled Water Extension Project is a very important project that's under construction. We definitely would like an update on that. But maybe we can take the DCS replacement project, which is item number B first, before we do the Palos Verdes Recycled Water Extension Project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, item 6B is the DCS replacement project review, CIP project 10080. And for this presentation, we have John Venner, our engineer one.
Thanks, EJ. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. So I'm here today to present information item 6B on the distributed control system replacement project. This begins on packet page 84, but we're starting today with the presentation on page 89. So last month we included a brief update on this project as part of the engineering update, and the information item today comprises a full project review, where we'll be discussing the background of the project, main drivers, and our options moving forwards. This presentation in practice took just under 15 minutes, so I'll try and put through it quicker. So to begin with, I'll briefly touch on what the DCS actually means. It refers to distributed control system. You may also hear SCADA, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. Our system is technically a hybrid between the two, but we're referring to it as DCS for the presentation of the project. Effectively, it's a control system that manages our entire recycled water production. So it is the brain and nervous system of our facilities. It monitors our systems, manages them, and links them together. It starts at the ground level with the equipment being controlled. So this includes pretty much every piece of equipment we have installed, from small motorized valves to whole microfiltration treatment trains. The equipment is controlled via PLCs, that's programmable logic controllers, and they tend to be placed in cabinets located close to the equipment, usually installed by the manufacturer of the equipment as part of their package. So these process controls are effectively like the branches on a tree, where they control that local process. PLCs in the field communicate back to controllers in the plant control room. These controllers manage the various PLCs, they provide communication between them, and they monitor multiple processes across the site. At West Basin, all of our controllers are proprietary units supplied by Emerson Electric. These controllers are in turn managed by servers, where data is stored and entered and control systems are implemented. And then operators can manage and review the control of a site via workstations, both in the control room and in the field. Our current setup allows for some management of the satellite plants to be done remotely via Run ECL to reduce the need for 24/7 manning of those satellite plants. So this remote control and monitoring is possible through the network we've created, both between the sites and on the sites themselves. So then if the process controls are the branch of a tree, the controllers, servers, workstations, and network are like the trunk of the backbone systems there. So everything flows through these systems, and if one of those sections of those systems were to fail, recycled water production would cease at that site. Whereas if the process equipment fails, we don't lose that particular piece of equipment. So approximately 2/5 of all of our hardware in the DCS is what we consider backbone equipment, while the remaining 3/5 of the process controls. Next slide, please. This slide details the issues we have with our current DCS at West Basin. In 2020, we contracted a consultant to conduct a thorough audit of our DCS. They deemed that over 2/3 of our system is currently obsolete, with a further 12% becoming obsolete. So the graphic on the right shows the proportions of each category that were deemed obsolete. Obsolescence in this sense has a strict definition. It means that the components are no longer manufactured by the vendor. So that means that they fail, we have to find replacements through third parties such as eBay, and that it's also a struggle to find firms willing to service or repair such devices. Further investigation by staff found that over 30% of the hardware deemed obsolete has the potential to cause a full recycled water production shutdown of either ECL or one of the satellite plants. So most of these components are in the backbone. This obsolescence is further compounded by other issues. So here at West Basin, we have limited institutional knowledge on how our DCS is set up and operated. We're running extremely outdated software across our entire system. Most of it is no longer supported by the manufacturer. So that means we have no service updates, no cybersecurity patches, and no technical support. And we haven't had that for many years. This presents a significant security risk, as our system is currently vulnerable to cyber attacks similar to those that have occurred in water districts across the country in recent years. In terms of O&M expenditure, we currently have to send operators out to remote facilities such as pump and disinfection stations on a daily basis to monitor their operation and check for alarms, as we currently don't have communication through the DCS with those remote systems, remote facilities. And finally, we've historically seen communications to our satellite facilities dropping out on occasion due to the age of the fiber lines we have installed between the plants that are around 20 years old. So this often results in a contract operator needed to staff the plants 24/7 for extended periods as remote monitoring that I mentioned before becomes unavailable. So as you can see from the graphic here, the network there, we've been working over the last few years, our IT and operations team have been working to reduce the obsolescence there. We still have quite a lot of obsolescence in our other elements of our DCS. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the most recent DCS failures. While they seem like low-dollar repairs, each of these has caused significant disruptions to both our daily operations and ongoing projects. The first point here is a good example of this. So when we began to integrate the custom microfiltration system at JMM, the phase 2 project, the on-site database server crashed. Despite having experts from Veolia, West Basin, and the vendor, Emerson, on site, we were unable to restore that server. The integration of that microfiltration system cannot continue without the server. However, that server type hasn't been manufactured for many years. So over the last month, we've put in a considerable amount of effort and time trying to source refurbished parts and building our own server. As of this presentation, the issue hasn't yet been resolved, and it is causing a significant and likely ultimately expensive delay on the JMM phase 2 project. So this slide depicts a number of similar failures over the last few years, each of which took significant time and resources to resolve due to the age of our system. But what this slide doesn't show are the numerous daily workarounds and temporary fixes that our contract operators and operations staff are having to implement on a daily basis to keep the system going. So that's why this project has repeatedly been ranked as one of the top 3 most critical projects to the district. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? Well, traditionally, we've only implemented DCS upgrades as part of individual projects. So the backbone of our system has been left mostly intact since we built the plants, with many critical pieces of hardware being present since 1995. Over time, we've grafted on the new process systems, so new PLCs, new process equipment, as we've added new processes. So, for example, in ECL Phase 5 project. This has led to a patchwork system across our sites with newer technology connected to older components via pretty elaborate patches and limiting conversion techniques. The majority of our system is now obsolete, and it's becoming harder and harder to connect new technology to that older backbone. The main reason this has occurred is because it's expensive, both in terms of cost and loss reduction, to refurbish the backbone of a DCS system. You have to take the system offline, which means offline, taking production offline. But the fact is that our aged backbone, as the controllers, servers, and network devices, are limiting the capability of our newer processes and preventing us from making even minor refurbishments to the system. In addition, as mentioned, our control systems are mostly now no longer vendor supported due to their age. So this presents significant risks as we move forward with the DCS system, where third-party contractors are, in some cases, refusing to work on that system due to its age. Reliability. Next slide, please. So project costs and expenditure. To date, we've spent $706,337. $475,000 of that was spent on the audit, which produced three reports where we detailed the obsolescence of our current system and potential next steps. The recommended path of those reports comprises a potential expenditure of up to $22 million across 10 years to refurbish the entire DCS. This includes everything from network and fiber infrastructure right at the top, all the way down to local process controls. Obviously, this refurbishment is highly dependent on many things, not least of which is the future direction we decide to choose the district, as that will heavily influence which sections of our system we want to refurbish. We have secured just over $800,000 in refinery funding to date, although the old agreements were based on total project budgets for this project far below the proposed $22 million. For this fiscal year, we had originally intended to simply implement some stopgap measures while the future direction of the district was established and we could reassess the overall refurbishment. However, in recent months, we believe we've devised a plan that we believe could eliminate most of our current issues at far lower cost. So Emerson Electric, I mentioned briefly before, they're the manufacturer of our proprietary controllers that we use across all of our sites. They recently approached us with a proposal to replace the entirety of our backbone system from network devices all the way down to those controllers. They were able to offer this proposal for a far lower cost than it would cost for us to go out to a third party and replace the whole system, or to replace the whole system ourselves, due to us already using their controllers, which form a large part of our backbone system. So they would refurbish those controllers and reuse current configurations. We've had many meetings and sidewalks with them over the last few months, and are currently awaiting a quote, a final quote. However, initial estimates indicate that this refurbishment would cost approximately $4.3 million in total, $3.5 million of which would go to Emerson for the hardware and installation, with the remainder being contingency and worst case and labor. Refurbishing the backbone of our DCS would eliminate or severely mitigate at least many of the current issues and risks that I just mentioned. So it wouldn't solve everything, but we'd eliminate the vast majority of those risks. And we wouldn't be expending resources on processes that we may not need in the future, depending on the direction of the district. So our calculations indicate that this approach would reduce our current risk by approximately 50%, but would only cost about 20% of that proposed total refurbishment cost, making this a cost-effective solution with an estimated return on investment of 2.4 years. Next slide, please. So while we believe this is the most prudent path, this backbone refurbishment, there are other options available. So we've got a do-nothing option here, which is the current practice of replacing components as and when they fail, and assume any risk of shutdowns. So the approach here is simple. We run our equipment until it fails, and then we replace it with whatever like-for-like replacement or repair it if we can, that we can find through third-party vendors. There's obviously a lot of risk with this approach. The graphic on the right here shows a risk matrix where you've got the probability of component failure on the left and the potential shutdown impact of a failure on the top. As you can see, over time, the failure for all component systems would increase slowly steadily. We're already seeing escalation of DCS failures, and this will only continue as the system ages and replacement become more difficult to find. So our estimated risk total is approximately $3.6 million per year due to the probability of failure, the cost of replacing parts, and the cost of potential shutdowns. Next slide. So this second option is what we were originally considering for this year, and this is what the proposed 23-24 budget contains the money for, $1.2 million for this stopgap measure. So this was based on uncertainty at the time around the district's direction and those high anticipated costs of the overall refurbishment. The aim was to procure standby replacement components for a few key PLCs that would be there to mitigate the length of any potential shutdowns. These would be like-for-like replacements that would be as close to plug and play as you can get. However, it's important to note that these would still be obsolete components, so we simply be pushing the issue down the road. This approach has the potential to reduce the shutdown impact for PLC failures. However, it would not mitigate any risks associated with infrastructure or the backbone, as you can't have plug-and-play systems into the backbone, you have to replace it as a whole. This temporary fix would reduce the estimated risk by half, and likely only cost $1.2 million. So it generates an estimated return on investment in less than a year. That's why this option was originally proposed for this year. And the current proposed budget for this fiscal year is $1.2 million to correspond to this option. However, as mentioned, this is only a temporary solution. And so staff have been continuing to evaluate other options that provide more permanent results. Next slide, please. This is the recommended option for this year. This is the one that we've established after much discussion over the last few months. So while technically it's the first step of a 3-stage full refurbishment, we're currently only recommending this first step. As mentioned before, this would alleviate many of the risks and issues we're experiencing and set the district up for any future direction without sinking costs into any assets we may not need. This refurbishment would give the district a fully supported backbone system with modern software, full technical support, and most importantly, a robust cybersecurity system to prevent and mitigate the threat of cyber terrorism. The aim will be to refurbish the backbone over the next 2 years, beginning with the Torrance site, and the total estimated cost is $4.3 million over those 2 years I mentioned, including contingency and West Basin labour. We also expect the costs for the Torrance and Chevron nitrified plant to be fully reimbursed by the respective refineries, which would reduce our estimated West Basin expenditure to approximately $3.5 million. So this would reduce the risk. The estimate is to reduce the risk by 50%, and so reduce the risk by $1.8 million per year, a cost of 4.3, gives a return on investment of 2.4 years. Next slide, please. These next 2 slides detail the next 2 stages in this overall refurbishment. In the interest of time, I can skip past them. But effectively, the next step would be to replace the infrastructure, all our plants, and the fibre between the plants. The return on investment there is pretty considerably long, so we're not recommending proceeding with this option at the moment. And then the next slide. And then this would be the final stage where we go through and systematically assess all of the processes we have across all of our plants, establish which ones we want to take forward for our future direction, and then systematically replace the PLCs controlling those systems if they are obsolete. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the options available to us in graphical formats. I won't spend too long here, but the important thing to note is that by refurbishing the backbone, so doing that stage 1, we would be permanently reducing the shutdown risk associated with our DCS. We'd reduce it from a high risk to a medium risk, regardless of whether we continue with stages 2 and 3. Next slide. And then here, this shows the overall refurbishment in graphical format. So the pie chart on the left there shows the total project expenditure to refurbish the entire system. And then the pie chart on the right shows the breakdown of the DCS backbone refurbishment we're proposing here. Next slide. So that brings me to our final slide, the next steps. We're currently negotiating the cost and schedule of the backbone refurbishment with Emerson. As this will likely be a sole source procurement due to the proprietary nature of the system, we're going to confer with our district council to establish the requirements are met. And we then intend to return to this committee with a recommended award for consideration in the next couple of months. Meanwhile, staff will be looking to develop updated drawings of our current DCS to minimise the potential risk when construction occurs. And we're also planning necessary shutdowns that will be required later on when we upgrade or refurbish this backbone, assessing any other projects or maintenance that we may wish to perform during those planned outages. If approved, the refurbishment will be given the Torrance site, as site assets there cannot be transferred until the site is refurbished, the site DCS is refurbished. And the refurbishment will then proceed through the satellite plants before taking on the largest task of ECL. Our current aim is to refurbish the backbone of the district ECS within the next 2 years to both significantly mitigate risks and enable the current operation and maintenance of our recycled water production. So with that, presentation's over, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Williams, do you have questions?
Not now, thank you.
Director Deere? Director Gray, do you have any questions? Okay, this item is for information, right? So there is no ask, but if I heard you correctly, there is a recommendation that you would like to move forward with.
There will be in future months. We're intending to come back. We're currently negotiating with Emerson to get a final quote. Once we have that and we've established that the sole source solution is viable, we then come back with, if we agree with the award, we come back and recommend.
So you would be coming back with a recommendation to approve a sole source contract that you negotiated with Emerson on the basis of just retrofitting the backbone system.
Yes.
So it is a recommendation that you're pursuing, and because it's going to come back, and we've negotiated a contract with Emerson for sole source, assuming that the general counsel finds a way to justify the sole source procurement, which I'm sure he will, and then ask that we approve it. You described a couple of other options, several of which were more expensive and more work being done. Is the rebuilding of the backbone system sufficient to basically address all of the issues associated with it?
It would mitigate most of them. Roughly, the estimate is currently 50% of those risks, but the most important ones being cybersecurity and the risk of electric shutdown. So it would mitigate the risks of things that we're seeing at JMM currently, and it would mitigate cybersecurity risks.
Okay, so once that investment is made, we probably will not see this come back.
The current plan is to make that investment, refurbish the backbone, and then reassess and come back to the board with any future recommendations, whether to move forward to the next stages or not.
And when Emerson talked about refurbishing it, they really meant reusing some of the existing equipment.
Correct, yeah.
Not replacing it. Because earlier, if I heard the discussion properly, some of this equipment can't be replaced or fixed, and therefore that's been an issue when there's been some failures of certain components, and everything required a shutdown and scrambling to try to make it work.
Correct, yes. So if we were to replace the entire backbone, so go to a third party or go to another vendor other than Emerson, or ask Emerson to completely rip out and replace the backbone, the significant expenditure there would be in manually going through and determinating all connections to every piece of process equipment and reconnecting it to a new controller or new server and new system. Emerson have developed a solution for what they call their legacy customers to migrate onto a newer controller by effectively re-terminating all of those wires at once. So they have a conversion kit effectively.
But they're not going to replace all the servers and all the workstations, etc. So they're really going to refurbish some of those computers that we already have, or update the software.
They would be replacing, so replace all network equipment, all servers, and all controllers. And then the cost is in they'd be using a conversion kit to re-terminate those wires to that new system, rather than having to manually determinate and re-terminate every single wire individually. So that's where the cost savings are through Emerson. Is that because the connection point is the controllers, they've got a conversion kit to convert to newer controllers at a lower cost.
So they're providing all new controllers.
Yes.
They're going to provide all new servers.
Yes.
And all new workstations and other computers.
Yes.
So it's not just software, enhancement?
No, it would be software as well, yeah, fully new software.
And all the PLCs will be upgraded too, or just
No, the
selectively?
The PLCs wouldn't be touched. They're in the phase 3 of that overall refurbishment plan. The PLCs, while they will still be obsolete and will still have potential shutdowns and failures of them, and will struggle to acquire parts, that's affected the other 50% of that risk. The risk is lower there though, because if a PLC fails, you lose a single process. It might be a single pump, it might be a single valve, it might be an overall microfiltration train, but we wouldn't be replacing the PLC.
All right, so as this moves forward, and we coming back with basically a sole source contract with Emerson that you're in the process of negotiating, or will begin negotiating if you're not doing so already, in the ballpark of $4.3 million.
If the negotiations go wrong.
And I guess this would be more directed to the general manager, but for yourself. The cost of this will be partially offset by some of the users.
Talk about our customers.
Yes.
This included in our current. Okay. That is correct.
Right, so the 4.3 million isn't gonna be just our cost. Our actual cost may be some amount lower than that. I think I saw a number in here about $700,000 that one of our recycled water customers was gonna contribute to this.
Chairman, that $700,000 was based on a different cost for the project, so we would have to notify those customers that the costs have changed. So it could be slightly different once it's all said and done.
Maybe you can keep us abreast of that.
Of course.
All right, so this is just a presentation. There's no action taken. I would like to see this come back every month and just get updated on the progress of the negotiations, and is that number changing, and then what our reimbursement portion may be. You just alluded to that number change in the memo. Okay. With that, then let's go ahead and return to item 6A, the Alice Village Recycled Water Extension Project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for this presentation, we have Veronica Goudet, our engineering supervisor.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. I'll be super brief. Basically, this particular board item 6A on page 81, it's only for the pump station. It was intended to be an information item that will be transferred into an action item at the board meeting. Just to give you a quick summary of the procurement that we did for the bid solicitation on the package. The construction bid package went up for bid on June 29th of this year, and we used our e-procurement system, the Mersal system, in which there were 1,600 hits in regards to this particular bid being distributed, or people that didn't get it. This advertisement was also included on our webpage, as well as LinkedIn. And there was a non-mandatory meeting on July 12, 2023, which was attended by 8 potential bidders or companies. These were originally due on August 8th of this year, and we got a request for time extension, which was basically extended through today. Today, we did get bids at 11 a.m., and we only got one bid, which is near double the original cost estimate that the construction, the engineering design firm had submitted. Halion Springs Enterprise, this is basically, we're still in the process of reviewing information. However, their bid results came out as $3,632,700.
How much?
$3,632,700. So staff is recommended to reject this bid and rebid the process and start the process again. That's basically my whole good for memo.
Okay, so that's it, you're done?
That would be a recommendation to
Veronica.
reject the bids and basically rebid to start the process again.
Go ahead.
So yeah, the initial intention, like Veronica said, was to turn this info item with the bids received today into a recommendation next Monday to award. But given what the results came in, again, I'll just reiterate that's our recommendation is to go out and bid again.
Makes sense to me, but
Our procurement staff reached out to some of the contractors that were interested in the project and participated in the procurement to try to get some feedback to what they've been in. There's some shared reasons, but we want to do a little bit more homework before we report out to that.
Question, because I was gonna ask the question since I said it's not there, but you opened bids today and I assume by this hour you had at least the bid results. How many bids did we receive?
What?
one,
Just one, and it was double the engineer's estimate.
Who was the bidder?
It's Canyon Springs Enterprise. They are the contractor that did the steel tank, steel tank at the JMM during the COVID times when we started with it a few years ago. So we have worked
So-
with them in the past.
Pac Hydro didn't bid this.
Pacific Hydrotech did not bid this. We did
I know,
reach out to
they
them.
do follow us. I know that. And yeah, I'm surprised that you only got one bid because there are several other contractors that,
And also, may I say, we did get other questions from other contractors when we were going through the bidding process, so there were indications, there were interested, so that's why we are suggesting to repeat the process again. It seems like some of them got also busy and potentially, there's the good faith effort that we originally extended the time in order to give them more time. And I think that we saw this in the pipeline too, that there was additional time that was requested. Fortunately, this time, they didn't continue to request more additional time to meet that request, so, or I think it's the best interest of the district to repeat the process, to repeat the project and see who get better results.
all right, so technically, I believe you do have to bring it back to the board and reject all bids and get authorization to rebid.
I believe I have the authority to reject all bids.
Oh, you do? You don't, it's not a board action?
No, I don't believe.
bid
Board action
rejection.
is required.
I thought it was that it had to come back, it has to come to the board, be a recommendation to the board to reject all bids and go out again or sometime, right?
I don't know what our administrative
It
code
should,
reads,
You
but
can verify.
in most agencies that I've worked with and for, we had the right to reject bids, but it was an action that had to be taken by
for the board.
the board, the governing authority. It wasn't an administrative or ministerial action.
Let me confirm, and if needed, we can bring this back.
You
up.
can bring it back. I think you have the support of this committee. It's a technicality. I see a hand raised. Went away. There was a hand raised.
Ordinarily, if if the board calls to reject the bids, to go out to bid, did we have the authority from the board to go out to bid?
Mr. Chairman, we do have our procurement staff on the call. Joanna?
Hi, yes, good afternoon, members of the board. Per the procurement policy, the board has delegated the authority to reject all bids to the general manager. So yes, typically in other
Okay.
agencies, the board has that authority, but it has been delegated to the general manager.
Okay. That answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna.
Okay. So thank you for that report and hopefully when we solicit bids a second time, because there are other contractors that do bid us that will probably do a better job. And we'll get more. For this, we should have had at least 3 or 4. And I was expecting that they're gonna rattle off 4 or 5 contractors. Anyways, I would like to then move on, and the last 2 items are the monthly engineering and operations report Again, just because of time, I would like to hear the operations report first. I'm going to take that one out of order again, if we can have that presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And for this presentation, we do have Uzi Daniel, our manager of operations. But before she begins, I did want to make a brief comment. You know, watching our operations team as well as our engineering team sometimes is extremely impressive. And the work that they do day in and day out is above and beyond, I think, what my expectations are. So I wanted to point that out. But over the past couple of weeks, we've not only had an air vac that was run over in the city of El Segundo, we had a significant power outage to our pump station at Hyperion. And so I really got to see for myself just the dedication, the level of dedication, the late hours, staff out on the street at 9:30 p.m. And it's just been impressive. So I want to point that out, but we didn't just make it through those two emergencies. This past weekend, we also had what was Hurricane Hillary turned into a tropical storm. And I just want to point out that throughout the weekend, getting emails day in and day out with regularity about what was going on at our facilities and that we were safe and still delivering recycled water was very impressive. And I know we have Linda here. So I want to say thank you to you as well as your team, but then also Barkev and Uzi as well, because I was able to kind of breathe a sigh of relief. We talked a little bit about the facility earlier as one of the action items, but we did have a pretty significant earthquake. And when that happened, I ran to my phone to see what was going on. And I had emails talking about how everything was safe. So I just want to say thank you very much. And Uzi, you can take it away.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. Still in my cheerleader thunder on that, but that's great. I appreciate the recognition. And I know I get up here, but I think it's important because we all share in this. You know, we're water operators, and a lot of us and our board members know what that means. There's almost like an oath you take in that commitment. And I do want to thank the operations team out there, seeing how we prepared ahead of time, working with MWD's EOC, coming together with potable water, recycled water. So, and even I have one regulator right now who followed up with us because they asked about preparedness, and we're quite pleased with what we had already prepared. So we all get to share in that. So, so thank you to everyone, including the leadership. As EJ also mentioned, it's, you know, it's always fun in operations. Come work for operations if you don't like to be bored and want new things every day. And we had, so, and this actually plays into the conversation we're having. We have had a few of these accidents where some people, a motor vehicle has sheared some of our air vacs that caused some pretty big issues for us. There are claims that are going out for that. But it showed not only the response time, but interestingly, getting emergency vendors on hand. I think this is something we have in the entire industry. As a lot of you know, I participate a lot with AWWA. I like to survey a lot of my colleagues. What are you doing? How are you doing this? And just this last Wednesday was the water education seminar, where over nearly 750 operations folks got together for contact hours, and it's education and workforce development. And one of the things when we ask what kind of courses do you need and what do you need, a lot, almost all, whether they were municipal or vendors, said that what they need right now are courses to help get new people trained up. There's still musical chairs. There's still a lot of people out there where they've got some great talent, but they need to get them up to speed. But it was interesting because the issues we're having with bidding, I have some emails from some folks. It's happening all over, for sure, the people we talked to in California and even Nevada, just some moving pieces. So I did want to let our board and the public know that as ops and operations, we get literally, if not daily, weekly calls and emails from vendors. And because I think every college student should have to be a server at a restaurant and do telemarketing for a few months to appreciate being kind, we make sure that even if they call to say we have, we'd like you to try our toilet paper, or we have giant water trucks and tractors, even if it's a service that we don't need, we always kindly direct them to our procurement system. We have Joanna and Colette that will then send an email letting them know, even if it's not us, we might do it in the future. We have other avenues where we get back to them. We have a weekly staff meeting where we'll invite them to give a 10-minute pitch to our team and engineering as well. And basically that's to say, we really know we benefit from having more vendors and diversity out there. So we do reach out. I think it's just a really interesting time and we're not the only ones. So I did want to share that because it's been a relevant conversation in there. And I think with that, I'll continue with this slides if you'd like. Any questions along the way? So these are our usual slides that we see here. You can see with turbidity, it did spike up. Hyperion is sharing in some of the same issues. The incident they had has long-term impacts on all the infrastructure that was flooded and corroding. So when they have their solid system, their oxygen system goes out, we feel it on our end. We're working on the communication with them still, but we've been able, now that we have a recovered system, and again, Linda is here, I think we've been able to handle those, and really we have a plan in place on how to adjust to those. Next slide, please. The same applies to our TSS. You can kind of see that can also fluctuate depending on anything that's happening over the planet. And actually, a regulator just asked me today if we're seeing any influent plant changes as a result of the storm. And I don't know, Linda, we haven't necessarily seen that come through yet. I think Hyperion also was preparing for that. But again, we are much more prepared to deal with those. Next slide, please. Here's some highlights. You can see the basket. Some of these pictures are great. We get there's a lot going out there each day. Just having to clean up when we have these upsets, then we have to do a little more maintenance. We have lots, our CMS system is really growing. But if we have these upsets, our regular PMs might need to turn into a CM because we need to take care of that. So we have some photos out here of just all the daily activities, whether they're response or things that have been scheduled on there. Next slide, please. As we move into recycled water production, we just started the new fiscal year, and that's why we kind of show you what we have budgeted on there. A little behind as a result of a couple of shutting down barrier and a few things during the last small upset. That's what we conserve first, but we're back on track, hopefully, and we'll see that in the next month. Next slide, please. We have the same here. You can see anything that's over a 10% difference. We have the green, red, we need to improve on that. And you can see sort of a result of anytime we have the upsets, and as we continue to recover our system, some of those inputs are down, and that is again for this month, or this past month, sorry, July. Next slide, please. Here we have comparison to last year. So we already can get a look, again, we're 1 month into this, but it's cumulative for the year of where we stand on our recycled water sales for the year compared to last year. Next slide. We move into our environmental compliance activities. Standard reporting has been a lot of activity from regulators. Compliance team doing well because I think a lot of people during COVID weren't doing inspections, so we're getting a lot of those now. We had the Lyme incident. AQMD responded, gave us a notice of correction. We were able to get together strong whole teams and send in that notice, and that there were no violations as a result of that. Next slide, please. This gets into our potable water customer service. We did the regular sampling. We're actually working on right now, because of some of the influent water from MWD right now, we're working with some of our purveyors here on some of the nitrite issues going on, all that successful, setting up meetings. And we'll also start working on UCMR. We'll see that in the future here as well. Next slide, please. Again, you can see some of when we get into the distribution system, some of the things that the regular activities that are going on there. This is another example of where there's a little bit of musical chairs in our industry going on. Infomark has been great, but some of their leadership has changed, moving around. We're actually going to be meeting with them, I think, in another week. But their ground crew is here and trained and still getting the work we need with Frank and the distribution team managing that. Next slide. Here's some of those photos of said valves. So this was a midday accident, DUI accident into that. And we can only get actually one. Some of you may know some of the standard. Another thing we're noticing is to get someone to respond to emergency. This is very different than when I started in Potable years ago, is maybe because of the situation with staffing, a lot of the normal usual suspects that we could call out to respond for an emergency repair that has heavy equipment, they're busy with their regular folks, and they're looking more for long-term contracts. They're gonna go first to those they have a contract with. So we're looking at other agencies, clever ideas. Is there a way to sort of have some regular type of function, sort of like we have done with some of our other contracts to make sure there's no supply issues. Next slide, please. Here we have some of our regular projects. We could probably roll through these. There's some great pictures of us connecting. Something to make of note, we often see these and we think they're brand new connections. Some of them are. But the way our permits are, we hold the permit for recycled water, even if the retailers distribute that water. We are required by our permit to make sure to do inspections, to make sure that we hear and know who the recycled water supervisor is for each site. So if they decided to, let's say, add some extra irrigation, or what if they put in, like in some cases, they might put in some artificial turf and just want to remove a section, they actually have to submit plans. We have to do inspections. We still have to go through that effort. So for a lot of these, we see a lot of activity out there, which is great. I mean, usually it's expanding the system, but anything done on site, which is not, again, I come from Potable in the past, anything on the other side of the meter was up to everyone else. But per our recycled water permits, we do have to ensure that and work with the county that what happens on the other side of the meter is done per our permit requirements. And we're going to ramp back up on our training for all the recycled water supervisors and move forward with that. Next slide, please. I think these are we have some more photos of the different locations. Some of these projects we mentioned. Those are all available in your packet. Any questions on those? And again, the list we have here, I believe that's it for the presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Director Lynn?
No, thank you.
Director Gray? Under recycled water sales, we're projecting on average about 3,000 acre feet a month.
We did try to average it per month, yes. We do when we forecast, we do try to anticipate seasonal. So that is an average, but we do also try to, when you look and you see the projections and you wonder why it kind of goes up and down, we try to adjust it for seasonality.
But on average, 36,000 acre feet seems like that's the goal. We may or may not get there. We haven't been getting there.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's really, if we're operating 100%,
correct.
We're aiming about 36,000 acre feet a year.
Yes.
You look at the graph over there, Dr. Alvarez, you're absolutely right. 3,000 is around the range for the summer/fall months. It's about 3,000 acre feet per month. But it does get a dip in winter months.
But plus or minus, that's what our delivery goals are, and that's really what our capacity would ideally be if we're operating at what we intend to operate and where our demand is. It's about 36,000 acre feet. Okay. It's always good to know that that's really what we're at, where we're at. One of the items I would like to see in this report, I know we covered the recycled water sales, portable water sales. If we could include that, also very important. And I'd like to see, the monthly variations in portable water sale.
Mr. Chairman, we can easily add that. It is important to note that we do include that in our Finance and Administrative Committee. So you'll see that in the monthly packet there, but we could add that if you want portable here.
I understand that, we'd like to have it here, so we look at recycling, we look at portable water as part of operations. Any other questions? Okay, we have one last report. I'd like to get out of here by 5 o'clock. So we have 13 minutes, not to put any pressure on anybody. But if we can do the engineering report real quick.
Yeah, this will be really quick, Chairman. Again, thank you, EJ, thank you, Director Alvarez, and the rest of the board. Please turn to page 110 in your packet. I'm going to give you a quick look ahead onto what is expected in September. We plan to come back, just like John Venner previous mentioned, that we'll be back with the DCS system, CIP 180. We expect 2 informational items, one being the CIP assumptions for the cost of service study, and also the Title 22 converted booster pump station closeout, CIP project 170. And now I'd like to introduce Veronica to give an update on the PV pipeline.
Yes, so this is the second component.
Oh, we got there already. No, I'm sorry.
No, there's another component. There's also a pipeline construction schedule. You follow me to package page number 112. There is a schedule that has been presented for the board members to look at the items that had occurred. Or notice to proceed to the contractor was done on June 26th, and since then we have had several meetings that include the construction kickoff meeting, community outreach canvassing, as well as meeting with the PLA. And in a slide that comes next, you will see a summary of who attended those meetings. But another component here too is that we have been doing community outreach meetings to stakeholders. One of them was to Cal Water, who is our partner on the funding of this, and also Torrance Parks and Recreations Committee. This meeting was done at City of Torrance on August 9th, and it was attended by public as well as commission members from Parks and Recs, and West Basin staff attended was from PIE, from Rakau Communications and Engineering. Feedback was positive, a couple of, comments that we received, but the meeting went pretty well. We are also having a meeting this upcoming Wednesday at the Palos Verdes Golf Club to basically discuss the outreach program that will be implemented along the way. Right now, the completion schedule is expected to be completed on the pipeline on March 22nd of this year. On the next slide, you can see just like a similar kind of format to the JMM project, in which you see the schedule and the contract duration, and as well as the construction costs. So far so good, not change orders, so we're still on the good greens. Request for information, we received one which was very minor, just for information in regards to record drawings, and then the submittals. We are basically keeping up as they come in. We're trying to respond as much as we can in a very quick response. Again, these updates were cut off through August 8, 2023 for purposes of submitting the board memo. For the next slide, please. So on this one, again, both pipeline and pump station do have a component including the PLA. And this is just basically a summary of the requirements of the PLA. I think it's very similar, follows the format of the JMM. It's basically the same requirements. And we had our meeting with unions on the next page. And you can see all the members of different unions and contractors that attended the meeting, which was a pretty good response. Contractors, unions were basically, this meeting, it took like approximately 1 hour, and basically the contractor who is construction, who is the prime, was able to get the union workers from each, not jurisdiction, but like basically, what is it, task or specialty for that work. So once we start doing the construction, we're going to start seeing the numbers of how many of these workers are at risk, or which ones are local, and you start seeing the development of that spreadsheet being presented for your use and information. The next slide, it's just a summary of the pump station construction schedule, which, or again, our anticipation was that we will have a contractor by this month. And unfortunately, results were not what we were expected. And we would like to try one more time. And basically, this particular schedule will be modified to accommodate for a new rebidding process. So with that, I complete my presentation, and I believe Kevin has the next project.
Thank you, Veronica. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez, members of the committee and board. I'll start on page 118 to highlight the JMM CRWRP Phase 2 expansion project. Commissioning is still ongoing on site with a lot of work being on the fine tuning of miscellaneous items around site. First photo there shows some installation of the sight glasses on our FRP storage tanks. On the right hand side, you can see electrical terminations. I think this is actually a flow control valve. Next slide, please. Work around site to clean up the site overall. We had plans for gravel replacement on site, so we've actually spec'd out you might recall there was some work done at the ECL treatment plant to clean up the site ahead of the visitor center renovation ceremony. So we've actually spec'd out the same rock to get some consistency throughout our facilities. So you can see that on the left-hand side. And as on the right-hand side, you can see the installation of bollards to protect some critical piping along the roadway there. Next slide, please. On the left-hand side, you can see the installation of one of the control panels, and on the right-hand side is the installation of the lighting within the CMF canopy. You can also see this is as if you were standing in between two of the microfiltration racks, getting ready to receive the modules in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. I'll quickly just highlight the status of the project. Our contractual completion date for the contractor was June 30th. We are a little bit beyond that now, and we continue to have discussions with the contractor and work through the responsibility for those delays. In terms of construction costs, the construction contract is currently sitting at right around $22 million. To date, we've paid just north of $20 million, so about $2 million left to be earned by the contractor. In terms of RFIs, there are a lot of RFIs ongoing on the project as we work through the commissioning and startup of individual pieces of equipment. There's been 320 to date, and we've processed 316. And on the submittal side, it's starting to slow down, but we've received 368 and have processed 365. Next slide, please. Here is the standing update on the highlight of the PLA status. The numbers look good overall. We're at 33.6 for our approved local number, 7.3 for our at-risk worker percentages, and 23% of the work hours provided on site are being done by apprentices, which is great to see. Next slide, please. Here's a breakdown of those numbers by company and division. Division 1 currently leads the way with the most hours related to the PLA, and our general contractor carrying the bulk of those hours being JR Phelon Construction. Next slide, please. Here's again the numbers broken down by trade and division. The majority of the work hours being provided by laborers, followed by electricians, operating engineers, and carpenters. I believe this is the end of the JMM update, but I will just follow up with what John said. We did have a slight issue or hiccup in the commissioning schedule related to the servers and the integration of the new equipment with the existing DCS system. However, we're expeditiously working through the issue and are expecting to have it resolved, if not by the end of this week, start of next week. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one question. When the original contract scheduled completion date, what was that?
That would have been April 27th.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
One more highlighted project. Over to Camille.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, members of the committee. So I will provide a brief project update on the recycled water fill station. So in this past month, we had one of our public information specialists attend an El Segundo Environmental Committee meeting to publicize the fill station and start to advertise to the community. We are still waiting on DDW for their approval. So in the meantime, we have been able to procure all of the on-site signage and print all the customer materials. We were also able to construct the fill station, and that happened on July 25th. And we were able to perform some flow rate tests just to ensure it's a steady flow. And we are also working with our own staff to determine and finalize operational hours, the staffing schedule, and the website. So for that website, we intend to have all of the information that our customers and customer retailers will need. So we do not see a need for an informational workshop to host an informational workshop. And also, as I said before, we received comments from Division of Drinking Water in early July, and we provided responses on July 21st. And so I have touched base and communicated with them just to ensure that we are receiving a conditional approval letter, and that should be coming soon. Once we are able to obtain that letter, we will work with our staff and public information to schedule an opening event. And in the meantime, we are also working with Woodard and Curran to update our title permit update for our draft engineering reports. So if you follow me to the next page, you will see some images from that construction. So it's a very simple setup. On the far left, you'll see the quick coupler valve assembly, which is connected to an existing quick coupler connection within our already existing irrigation system. And then on the bottom left, you'll see a sub-meter amount, and that's purpose is basically to track how much water is being used every time a shift occurs. In the middle, you'll see a whole fill station assembly, as well as the bucket that we use to test the flow rate. And on the far right, you'll see the hose and nozzle, which we intend to stretch out to where the customers will pull up and will fill up their recycled water containers. And so that was my presentation.
And the final section of this report is the project budget information.
Before we go on, I have a question or two. So if we can go back to that picture, the previous one, that's the filling station, right?
Correct, yeah.
And how much did that cost us?
Overall, right now, our construction was about $4,000, and that's including all of the other logistics that need to happen, such as the canopy setup.
That was $4,000.
For just the fill station, it was under $1,000.
So basically, it's a 3/4 inch hose connection. Could we have put a slightly larger connection in there?
So when we did our technical memorandum with Tetra Tech, they had advertised to keep it under. We could have done a larger connection, but then that would be more costly. But then for the hose length, we were recommended to keep it under 25 feet to maintain that flow rate.
If you're filling up 1,000 gallons, it takes a little while with a 3/4 inch hose.
Correct. Well, the maximum amount of the volume capacity that they can bring is 300 gallons. So it will never have to fill.
What if you had a landscape contractor that would like to have more water than that? We're limiting them to 300 gallons?
So this is a residential fill station. If we want to do contractors or other kinds of commercial, we would look into doing that separately. So this is specifically for residents.
Well, I guess I'm forgetting something. I thought at the time we authorized this, and I remember, at least my recollections that I kept saying, there are a lot of landscape contractors, which appear to be the primary users, that are interested in this. for maintenance of homeowner associations, large apartment and commercial properties. So they're basically not able to avail themselves of this?
Not for this fill station, but we do have a tech memo going on for those that intend to open a commercial fill station.
This is the one at the SC Little plant, right?
Correct.
Wouldn't that be where you would, my anticipation, to be very honest, was that that would be where landscape contractors would go, and they typically would probably be filling up 1,000-gallon tanks. And that we'd have a standpipe that would be able to connect a meter to them, and that they would be able to load the 1,000-gallon tanks in a few minutes. And you may have sent us the tech memo on that, but please resend it to me.
Okay. So in that tech memo, I can tell you that there was an option to have some sort of commercial fill station. However, that would require a separate meter to be built. So it would cost.
Well, either separate or the same one. I mean, a residential customer with a 300-gallon tank could just use that. It would have been filled up relatively quickly. I'm not quite sure you needed two. I think one geared to a landscape contractor would have served both. Anyways, thank you for the report. Wendell, you were going to go ahead, if you can wrap it up relatively quickly. I think that
Yes,
yours is just a list of all the projects.
Yes, the last section of this particular attachment A starts on page 130, and this is the list of project budgets for fiscal year 22-23. This is the last report for 2023. Next month we'll be reporting 23-24. This gives you through to the June 30th of this year. There's 3 pages of that report. And then the final attachment B, is the actual contracts, reporting the contracts that the department have active at this particular time. And this is through, again, the same period through June 30th, 2023.
Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us to closed session, which I believe you don't have any. Director's comments for future agenda items. Director Williams, do you have any?
No, thank you.
Director Deere, do you have any?
No.
And Director Gray still with us, or? Okay, I don't have any, so this meeting is adjourned. We will be meeting again next month, and I believe we're going to change the meeting date from September 13th to an unknown date. Thank you all.